Allow me to begin by stating this. Early Christian religious identity was distinctive in replacing all others for its devotees. It was an exclusive religious identity defined entirely by its standing in relation to the one God and was not dependent on or even connected to their identity. This distinctive early Christian group identity is perhaps the earliest attempt to articulate what moderns would recognize as a corporate religious identity that is distinguishable from and not corollary of one's family, civic, or ethnic connection. Although the preceding statement may seem innocuous and rather simple as a conclusion of a chapter, it is the overriding message of chapter 3 of Larry W. Hurtado's work, Destroyer of the Gods, Early Christian Distinctives in the Roman World. Hurtado does much to support his thesis and uses a vast composition of supporting information from historical sources along with biblical scriptures to provide a glimpse into the rather dark and uncertain past of the early Christian church and its humble beginnings as a cult movement which was wholly distinct and unique from the atmosphere of religious and paganistic philosophical thought of the first century. Now, while this work is in no way the single most exclusive peek into the historical elements of the Christian church, nor any groundbreaking revelation is achieved in this particular publication, Hurtado escorts his readers to the myriad of ideologies, practices, and philosophies of the Jesus movement, which mark it as something distinct within the realm of religious identity in the Roman world. Additionally, the author uses this book to embark upon a journey revealing the synthesis of a new religion out of the amalgamation of the thoughts from the Jewish Torah, the multitude of missives from the progenitors of this fledgling faith, and within an era of loosened social morals condoned by the patriarchal Roman society. By summary, the thesis of the entire book is marked within the third chapter as the author begins to unmask the social distinction of faith within the realm of this new belief of Christianity. Hurtado uses very eloquent language to show the similarities of religious thought during this era, which included the pantheon of Roman deities and a cacophony of mystery religions which propagated the width and breadth of the Roman Empire. Hurtado states, for Jews, as for other peoples and nations, what we call religious identity was simply a component of ethnic identity. Jews perceived themselves and were perceived by others as following a pattern of religious behavior different from other people. But their particular religious behavior, specifically their refusal to take part in the worship of other gods, was understood as simply a peculiar feature of the Jewish people. However, the distinction which marked Christianity was its exclusivity in worship of one God and Jesus the Christ, who was regarded and referred to as the Savior of proselytes. This ideology of worshiping exclusively the one true God was wholly unique to Christianity and could not, according to Hurtado, be found to have been replicated in any other religious practices. This observance would lead practitioners and apologists of the faith to regard it as the mark of faith. To put it in more prosaic terms, early Christians took up a new kind of religious identity that uniquely was both exclusive and not related to their ethnicity. Hurtado mentions the mystery cults of Mithras and Isis as examples of their inclusion into the culture of the first century. However, he does so to show the familial connection rather than the ethnic dissociation between religion and society. My critique. As stated at the beginning of this critique, Hurtado's work is in no way the single most exclusive peek into the historical elements of the early Christian church, nor does he provide any groundbreaking revelation in this particular publication. The author does spend time in noting the individual marks of distinction in great detail for the genesis of the Christian church in antiquity, as he uses examples of difference to call the religious movement distinct. But in that regard, all religious movements would be distinct, as they are all characterized by some unique quid, which becomes the attribute of distinction from their predecessors or even their progenitors. The author does well in demonstrating and cataloging how Christianity as a specific cultural identity was shaped and embarked upon a new line of faith within the realm of paganistic thought of the Roman Empire. The Roman world indelibly shaped how Christianity would be perceived as a religious thought and as a moral and ethical ideal within a patriarchal and brutish society such as the Roman Empire. And Hurtado painstakingly narrates the enumeration and expansion of it well, as he points to the exclusivity of devotion rather than worship. Although much of the third chapter provides insight to the differences of Christianity within its time, Hurtado provides little in the way of additional information to how this religion offers exclusivity in worship, except in foods offered to idols, or the new practice of how meals are to be observed in the context of the movement. But Hurtado does well in noting the Jewishness of the faith as it cut across all ethnic boundaries similar to Judaism. Hurtado states, Paul links his pagan Gentile converts and Judean Jewish believers as participants in a shared religious endeavor and identity in Thessalonians 2:13 through 16. This trans-ethnic link of circles of Jewish and Gentile believers is even more tangibly shown in Paul's extent to enlist his Gentile churches to take part in a financial collection for the Jewish church in Jerusalem. Now, the main weakness of this publication is the lack of reference to Jesus as the Messiah and the redemptive drama played out within the gospel story. If it were not for the crucifixion, there would be no Christ. In fact, Paul's greatest argument throughout the Gospels was to point to the relevance of Jesus as the one who Christians would not only worship, but also represent in the temporal world. Sadly, Hurtado makes no reference to this being the pillar on which Christian faith is based. Hurtado closes chapter 3 without a single thought of how Christianity was a part of a social environment which was founded upon a legalistic sacrifice of religious thought from a particular ethnic people in Leviticus chapters 4 through 6. This legal attribute of belief not only shaped the cultural identity of this distinct religion, but paved the way for a revolution in ethical thought, as the ideal of salvation was revolutionary. Hurtado's justification of this lack of redemptive assessment can be summed up in this statement by Hurtado himself. Certainly, Christianity did not fall from the sky like some foreign object. It was a historical phenomenon and can be studied as such. But it would be facile and poor historical analysis to ignore the very real ways in which early Christianity was a novel and distinctive development. Although there was nothing that this writer can say is innovatory of the book Destroyer of the Gods, Early Christian Distinctiveness in the Roman World, the work did create a moment of pause to consider the development of Christianity as a leading religion in the world today. It is not a sounding call to the remembrance as the prophets of the Old Testament, but it is a milestone on the journey to enlightenment in learning the cultural, philosophical, and theological creation that is the Jesus movement.